Hi, this is Cathleen Sensabaugh giving you my presentation on Diane Gossen. I found Diane Gossen to be quite interesting. She has a lot of the same philosophies towards working with children that I do, about working with children in a positive way, helping them see that how to fix their mistake instead of punishing them for their mistake. All the different little bucket fillers that I always like that book about how to fill your bucket, and I think that her philosophies go really hand in hand with that. I think that I wish all of my children's teachers would have learned some lessons from her as well, and I hope that I'll be able to take her philosophies into my classroom. I know I'll take them into my classroom. Hopefully, my school climate will be one in which I'll be able to bring these when I do get my full-time teaching job. So here's my presentation about Miss Gossen, and I hope that you enjoy learning about her as much as I did. Thanks.
Diane Gossen, Restitution Restructuring, Cathleen Sensabaugh's Behaviorist Presentation for EDG 510. Who is Diane Gossen? Diane Gossen is a former elementary, high school, and special education teacher. She's the author of It's All About We, Rethinking Discipline Using Restitution, and Restitution, Restructuring School Discipline. She's a senior faculty member of the Institute for Reality Therapy, Control Theory and Quality Management, and the International Association for Applied Control Theory for 25 years. She's written and published 30 training guides for teaching self-discipline. The video journal's package titled Dealing with Disruptive and Unresponsive Students focuses on Diane's work in school districts in Canada and the United States. What is restitution restructuring, you may ask? Well, restitution restructuring creates conditions for the person to fix their mistake and come back to the group strengthened. It's a process of consensus that celebrates diversity and views conflicts as positive. It utilizes brain-based research for teaching and discipline. What it is not. Restitution restructuring is not a system of punishments and rewards. It's not about placing blame and administering consequences. Restitution restructuring is not about color changes and denying recess and punishments for breaking a pencil. It's a whole new take on things. Why? Because as you know and I know, the system of rewards and consequences just isn't working. There's lots of recent brain research that shows that when we frighten, shame, or chastise children, their brains downshift and they can't make moral sense of their actions. You know, we can all take a look at that little cartoon with the teacher screaming at the student squinting his eyes and leaned back away from the teacher being real aggressive and angry and scary. And you've seen that happen in the schools you work in, and probably have heard about it happening to your own child if you have a child in school. So this is something that I'm really glad to see people are starting to embrace. What is brain-based discipline? Well, Eric Jensen, a researcher, defines it as the purposeful engagement of strategies based on principles derived from solid scientific research. And who can't be on board with that? It uses research from related fields like social neuroscience, behavioral genetics, and cognitive science. It then applies these findings in a meaningful group of principles that represent our understanding of how the brain works in the context of education. It fosters strategies based on body, mind, and brain research. So it's on the total package. It's not focusing on just the behavior. It's not focusing on just how to teach. It's focusing on the total child and how to help them learn in the best way possible. A brain-based teacher understands these principles and the reasoning behind her teaching. According to Diane Gossen, she uses these strategies in a purposeful way. So, what's keeping teachers from making the switch to brain-based discipline? If they can see that it works, they can see the research, they can read all of these things and think of how wonderful their classroom would be if they could just get things to go this way. Well, Teachers have many worries about making such a switch. Like, can the kids actually help each other without being told exactly what to do? How do you give up rewards once you've been using them to gain compliance? I mean, how does that color change? How is not going home on green going to motivate little Steven to stay on task during writing? How is, little Lily going to do good on her math test if there's no candy bar for people who tested distinguished? Also, kids tend to say what you want to hear when we talk to them about beliefs. They want to make you happy. Also, what about the time this is going to take? This takes a lot of time. What about these test scores? What about all the tests that are coming up? What about them? How are we going to fit it all in with all the curriculum that has to be covered? Because teachers feel responsible for their students' learning and for their behavior. The problem that Diane Gossen found was that it was nearly impossible to make changes to a classroom management system without first working with the staff to help them shift their paradigms. How are teachers supposed to do this? How are they supposed to go from the tried and what they've always done, it's not really working, but this is what they know? How are they supposed to do this? So Diane Gossen created a method of self-evaluation for teachers to see the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. It's kind of like a self-tester for them. She came up with something called the 5 positions of control: the punisher, the guilt maker, the buddy, the monitor, and ultimately the manager. First off is the punisher. The punisher punishes. There's a lot of anger being used, there's a lot of criticism, some humiliation. Usually a punisher yells and points. But it can be done softly if the threat's significant enough. You've all heard the teacher, maybe you're guilty yourself. I guess I'll have to keep the whole class in. Sarcasm and threats are used to gain compliance. Problem is, punishment is an attempt to put people in an inferior position. And the legacy that this position leaves is rebellion. There's always going to be something that comes up from this. Whether or not the student is going to draw and write on their desktop, whether they're going to openly defy you when they've had enough, whether they're just going to turn around and push another child, the legacy is always going to end up being rebellion. Number 2, the guilt maker. The guilt maker uses silence, withdraws their approval, and moralizes to punish. They don't yell. They just make the youths feel like they are bad people. They play upon the kids' values to put them in an unworthy position. So what happens then? Students are going to start hiding or denying mistakes so that they won't feel guilty and hear things like, "I'm very disappointed in you." The legacy of this position is poor self-esteem. You've always got this poor kid feeling like they're just a total failure, and they're just guilty, and they're just a bad person because they can't just seem to make any better choices than that. Poor self-esteem. Number 3, the buddy. The buddy uses friendship and humor to influence kids. This isn't harmful, but it leads to dependence as the student is always trying to please the teacher. This can lead to resentment towards the buddy whenever that buddy has to be a disciplinarian. "I thought you were my friend." The legacy of this position is weakness. You haven't developed any strengths in your student. They are totally dependent on you to be there to cheer them up, to laugh, to make them do what you want to do. They haven't learned how to make any decisions on their own, how to do the right thing. So it's a twofold weakness. You've created a weak student because they can't choose things they can't make the right decisions as far as their behavior goes. And you've put yourself in a position of weakness because you absolutely have no control. You're just the jokester and the friend. Number 4, the monitor. The monitor uses a stimulus response discipline to dole out consequences that are both positive and negative. Students behave to avoid punishment or gain reward. And if the supervision is done consistently, then they learn to reform. So this is what you've seen, the rooms with all the color charts and the clips. Move your clip, move your color. You're on red today. You've got sent home on green. You know, every classroom has a different system set up, and some of the kids really are affected by what color that they go home on a daily basis. And some of the kids will tell you stories about the punishments they get if they don't bring the right color home. And these are things that I really don't want to have to be responsible for, knowing that I have had a hand in. What happens with this type of situation is that eventually your list is going to get longer because the students have been looking for loopholes around all of your rules. The legacy of this position is going to be conformity. You're going to get everybody to do what you want, but they don't want anything bad to happen. But they're not doing it because they have learned anything. Number 5, the manager. This gets to be the goal of restitution. The goal of restitution is to teach youth the self-discipline that they need rather than just controlling them through consequences and rewards. A good manager will help develop social contracts. A good manager will be able to take a kid and be able to bring them back in the room feeling better than they did when they had to step out. A good manager will teach kids about individuals' internal motivations, like that you can't control another person, and people have their own unique idea of how they want things to be. So you got to work with them on teaching them all of these things, and they've got to learn how to identify their feelings and to see them as signals about their needs. You get them to answer yes and no questions about how things are and about how they think they're doing. Ultimately, you ask the kids, what kind of person do you want to be? Well, does restitution restructuring work? Well, yeah. Got a couple of schools up here. Grady Brown Elementary School in North Carolina implemented restitution restructuring and saw office discipline referrals drop from 12 to 15 a day in 1990-91 to 1 to 2 a day in 93-94. West Middle School in Rockford, Illinois saw a 64% drop in discipline referrals from 94 to 98. I think it's working. How do you get there from here? It's a 3 to 5 year process. You've got to start by teaching children that all humans are internally motivated by basic needs. You create social contracts that everyone can believe in. You teach the children those 5 positions of control. And you find solutions instead of placing blame. So to sum it all up, restitution restructuring emphasizes finding a solution. Students are taught to view their feelings as signals about their needs. Restitution restructuring looks for the answers no and yes to the question, is this working? Is this working for you right now? It seeks to strengthen and restore the child to the group.